We are going to take you on a journey today. And we think we wanted to go into the Wayback Machine and look at Granville from 1937, as these aerials show you. Lots of bucolic land use until Northridge came along. Granville was a really contentious annexation. It finally was finished in 1962, and it happened after all mass transit had left town. It was the only area of town that was really developed during the automobile age. And so when you look at it, you begin to think, oh, that must have influenced it. This story about Granville is really a story about the Cole family, a very aggressive real estate group back in the day who had become very successful in a very short period of time. And they put a big bet on Northridge. And you're going to find out why they did that against seemingly odds against them. So the history of Granville is really tied to the dreams of prior developers, maybe propelled by the dreams of today's developers, but it's going to be a pretty wild ride. So I'm going to suggest that you just strap it in, and here we go. So the first thing we'll look at, I hope, oh, here we go. I was doing research, and on a site called deadmalls.com, I found an article by Tom Dakin. Is Tom here today? Dr. Dakin, are you in the house? No? Tom Dakin had a blog, and there's something else that's supposed to come up here. And there was a quote in that blog. Mary, there it is. So, and this was a comment, and it said, to understand the northwest side of Milwaukee, imagine a place where all the worst architects of the 50s, 60s, and 70s were exiled and allowed to go crazy. That was a comment on Dakin's article, which I think is, you look at it against the rest of the city, you say, what the hell happened up there, right? And what happened up there was the result of how Granville came into the city of Milwaukee. And if you look at an annexation map of Milwaukee, you'll see that there are a lot of jagged lines, which suggest that there was a lot of contention between suburbs and city on how it grew. Granville was the last annexation into the city in 1962. It was settled as a result of a court dispute between the village of Brown Deer and the city of Milwaukee that was ultimately solved by the state Supreme Court. That's how bad it was, and that's when Granville finally came into the city. So just think about that as a developer. All of a sudden, 10,000 acres of land are annexed into the city, and what do they get? Water and sewer service. Oh my God. So you begin to think about this in like gold rush mentality, like all of a sudden, I've got a lot of land to develop. I got to go up and get me some land, right? But there's one small issue. The small issue is, how do I get there? And so you look at the early pattern of freeway systems in Milwaukee, and they were pretty modest. But then once they got going in the early 1960s, almost concurrent with the annexation, the Freeway Expressway Commission came out with this incredibly aggressive freeway map. And the freeway map showed how they were going to essentially ring the city. This is kind of the make no small plans, Daniel Burnham moment for freeways. And there were these north-south freeway corridors, including the one in the middle that we'll talk about right next to Northridge. That was the Stadium North Freeway. This is 1962, when the annexation was happening, when water and sewer service came. Suddenly, there was freeway access to the heart of Granville, about a mile east of Northridge. Okay, so you're saying to yourself, well, what freeway? There's no freeway there. Well, of course there's no freeway there. And who in their right mind would build a regional mall in the middle of nowhere without freeway accessibility? Well, the Cole family said, we're getting our freeway, so we're not going to be 4.5 miles away from the nearest interstate. We're going to be about a mile west at the first major arterial intersection. That is what prompted them to think that this was an ideal place to build a regional mall. Why would you build a regional mall here if you didn't have freeway accessibility? So what did they do? They went out and they just bought a shitload of land. You know, they bought as much as they could get. And so as the developer cometh, and here we are with our former senator on the left, the patriarch Max Cole in the middle, the other brothers on the right, And they said, yeah, we're going to buy it up. And they bought up enough land, not only for Northridge Mall, they bought up enough land to build 6,000 housing units around Northridge Mall. So this is the big land grab of all time, and they assembled all this land. There's a very interesting tidbit in that regard, and that's that they would have actually bought more land, but they were cut off by another famous Milwaukee family, the Cudahy's. Michael Cudahy's family had its homestead at 87th and Brown Deer. Cudahy owned the land west of Northridge and owned Servite Woods to the south of Northridge. So the Coles said, we're going to go up to County Line Road and buy everything else. And they did. They assembled all the land in that area, and off they went. So then you look at it on a continuum basis, and you begin to put all this together, and we're going to drop in Northridge in a moment because Michael's going to take over here. And you can see where these annexation events happened. You can see where the freeway happened. You can see that Northridge opened in 72. That freeway was demapped in 74. Oh, God. that would kill me. And then the Coles, to their credit, they owned that center for 16 years. They sold it for, I think, was a multi-$100 million price, I think, to JMB Realty, if I'm not mistaken, who sold it later for, I think, $4.5 million to Tucker Development. But you can see the continuum of annexation, transportation, development, and you begin to understand what happened to Northridge. Michael?
Thank you, Bob, for the very amusing and educational history. So I think what we want to do now is just kind of look at the data and see what it tells us. So one of the things we noticed is that there's a lack of population growth. So you can see here in this chart, from 2000 to 2010, there was some, modest growth. But beyond that, it kind of tapers off and actually declines a little bit. So that's something to pay attention to. Non-traditional households. So there's a significant number of non-traditional households in the Granville area. We're talking, single parents, senior citizens, individuals living alone. So that's something that we really want to also pay attention to. So local jobs does not equal local employment. So this actually kind of shocked us when we looked at some of the data. So it turns out that 90+% of Granville area residents actually commute out of Granville to work. But beyond that, and this will shock you, there's 2x the number of jobs per workforce age residents in Granville, like 2x. So why are they commuting out of Granville? Retail imbalance. I think this is goes without saying. Way too much retail, right? For kind of ratio retail to residential. Ethnic and cultural diversity. So there's a great cultural diversity fabric here. So it's something that we want to really harness. So now I want to just kind of give you guys a mapping of municipal services. And so this would be interesting to see, what's out here. So this hexagon, I think that's a hexagon, maybe, yeah. Shows where Northridge is, right? So this is a police station map. Very far, right? The nearest police station. Fire stations, similar thing, right? And lastly, libraries, a little bit better. So I think what you're seeing is kind of the general idea of isolation, right? Lack of municipal services. And the additional kind of tidbit is if you put healthcare facilities on the map as well, you see a similar result. So now we want to just kind of give you a feel of what's in the area. So what's really cool is that surrounding the site, there's quite a bit of publicly available, publicly owned green space surrounding the site that's underutilized. So we really want to connect to that. There we go. All right, so now we kind of giving you a little bit of background to lay the land. So we want to talk a little bit about our goals and objectives of this development. So connections, I mentioned there's tremendous isolation. So we really want to reinforce some of the existing residential neighborhoods with our redevelopment. Provide some desirable attributes, really utilizing that public land. promote a healthy lifestyle, again, very common theme, and really celebrating the intergenerational culture that exists. Reconnecting residents to the history of the land. So there's a really strong history in agriculture, so we'll touch a little bit on that later. And rebalancing the land uses. As I mentioned, we have way too much retail, so more residential and more employment. So what does this look like visually? So that first box is our site. And so surrounding the site, what you notice when you zoom out is there's quite a bit of existing residential clusters that are really disconnected, both north of Brown Deer and south of Brown Deer. And then there's a waterway, the Little Menominee River, and then you see kind of rendering there some additional residential. So really our goal is to connect these residential clusters with the Northridge site as an anchor. So zooming in on the site a little bit, what the heck do we do with all this retail, right? So what we're proposing is that north of Brown Deer, all that existing retail, we want to relocate to south. Because right now the challenge with the retail is that was really unintentional, right? A lot of different uses that don't make a whole lot of sense, scattered, right? So we really want to create some density south of Brown Deer. And what this allows us to do is north of Brown Deer, we can create some more intentional mixed-use project that ties in with, of course, the proposed Royal Capital project. So what does our proposed site actually look like? So what we're initially proposing is creating this green space spine that connects, shocking, that connects the corner of 76 and Brown Deer to the existing green space to the north. And along this spine, we're able to create some really intentional uses that kind of tie in with our goals and objectives. Oh, gotta click it. Forgot about that. So the first thing we want to do is, 76 and Brown Deer Road is an overpass intersection, right? We want to lower that down, create a more traditional intersection, so that would help with accessibility, right? Secondly, civic and municipal cluster services, as we mentioned before. The third thing we want to introduce is an agri-hood and agri-tech cluster, which I think, again, connecting with the history of Granville, access to health-related services, facilities, and lastly, just connecting to that existing green space. I'm going to turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, Michael. First of all, I stand behind the not really Chinese wall, but a firewall within our office. So I had no idea what the other teams were doing, but I think what you're seeing is a theme here. So what are we proposing? This was actually taken from an article that about what was originally planned around Northridge Mall when it was first conceived, and they called it a community within a city. And we really love that concept. But we wanted it to go back to the original sort of use of the site, which was agriculture, but take it to a modern term or use of agriculture, agri-tech. Agri-tech, hydroponics, sort of the industrialization of healthy food growth within urban areas. And so this community would have a very heavy agri-tech focus. And obviously creating jobs through this sort of main industry for this agri-hood. And then the idea that we could build around that your 5-minute city. So a 5-minute city is really all your daily needs within a 5-minute walk of your residence. Also understanding that Milwaukee is competing against other communities around the southeast Wisconsin area that are trying to revitalize their downtowns. That's what people want. People want to live in those types of communities. So obviously the healthy food experience growing out of that agri-tech industry and culminating in a new Granville. So how do we do that? Obviously establishing this greenway or green spine. But we thought it was really important to connect Cole Park, which is to the northwest, to this intersection of Brown Deer Road. Brown Deer Road is still going to be the major access point for this development. What we felt was absolutely critical for the success was to drop the intersection. This is actually the only overpass left over Brown Deer Road between 41 and 43. So that's key. And that obviously opens up some key visibility to something that I think will not only be a great neighborhood, but something that will attract both regional, local, and maybe national retailers as well. So you can start to see here, obviously knitting the surroundings. We're keeping the ring road, we're keeping a lot of the infrastructure in place, but we're actually tying some of the roads through to create this, to create this really complete neighborhood. You can start to see the access points, preserving those. Again, connection is really key to making these walkable communities very vital. And sort of running through how the programmatic elements occur, you can see that sort of green spine becomes sort of the outdoor agricultural elements along 76th Street, the actual industrial tech portion of the agricultural piece, which again is a really growing industry, and we feel like that this is really going to set the stage for the rest of the community here. A wellness-based retail, basically based on food that's grown within this community, as well as a civic and community component to this right at the heart of that intersection. And then sort of tying all that together would be really more local, farm-to-table businesses, restaurants, market, smaller scale retailers, that sort of thing. And as we go, sort of expand out from that, the idea that you could have a community center on the opposite end of this green spine, and you fill in that sort of neighborhood along that green spine with high to mid-density residential, as well as continuing sort of the existing vernacular in the cottage court residential to really fill up that neighborhood. And you can see here, that sort of culminates in a neighborhood that really ties not only to the existing Brown Deer and 76th Street intersection, but all the way up to Cole Park into a community that we feel will have a great visibility for the new industry and the retailers that this could attract. So with that.
So our closing is, you can't make a silk purse from a sow's ear, which of course I just took off the screen. And it's an old saying that you can't make something good out of something that's that bad. And we thought it kind of fit with the agrarian theme of Granville being in agriculture for so long. But we think that the plan that Rinka came up with, which we have just seen, I think, in the last 24 hours, we think that plan was pretty impressive. And in fact, as we looked at it and we said, boy, we can do this in a very new urbanist fashion and with modern planning principles. And it actually seems to fit with the rest of the neighborhood. The road patterns, it just feels like it belongs there, and it almost justifies all the craziness that happened there before today. So thank you for your attention, and thank you for the extra 4 minutes. I appreciate it.